courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I would like to thank the previous speakers. Distinguished guests and colleagues and friends, it is an honor to stand before you today, and yet as I prepared this speech, I struggled not because I lacked things to say, but because there are too many urgent matters demanding our attention. We are living in an era of profound instability, inequality is deepening, democracy is eroding, wars are spreading, and all of this is happening against the backdrop of an accelerating climate crisis. The weight of these crises is not abstract. It is felt in the exhaustion of those working 2 or 3 jobs and still struggling to afford a home. It is felt in the desperation of young people watching their future shrink before their eyes. It is felt in the violence of conflicts that displace millions. It is felt in the suppression of voices calling for justice. It is felt in the widening gulf between the powerful and the powerless. Not long ago, the world seemed to be moving toward a new future. Governments, corporations, and financial institutions declared their commitment to a green transition. We were told that fossil fuels would be left behind, that sustainability would lead the global economy, that prosperity would be built in a way that benefits all. And then suddenly that momentum collapsed. With a single election in the United States, the political winds shifted, and the illusion of a corporate-led green transition crumbled. We ask ourselves, what happened? Corporations that had spent years promoting their commitment to sustainability quietly reversed course. They are expanding their fossil fuel investments. They are lobbying against stronger climate policies. They have doubled down on profit over progress. And what does that tell us? That these commitments were never about principle. They were never about true transformation. They were about convenience, and when political conditions changed, so did their priorities. But the deeper problem is this. Even before this shift, the green transition was not built on justice. It was built on the same economic structures that created the crisis in the first place. And unless we change that, unless we recognize that a sustainable future must be rooted in fairness and equality, this transition will only reinforce the very inequalities that brought us to the brink. Far too long, economic inequality has been treated as an unfortunate side effect. Please, Sheikh, you wanted the people's attention. I would also like your attention. Thank you, thank you, thank you. For too long, economic inequality has been treated as an unfortunate side effect of progress, a necessary trade-off, an acceptable price for innovation, but that logic is failing. Because inequality is not just an economic issue, it is a political issue, a moral issue, and most urgently, a threat to global stability. A world where a handful of billionaires control more wealth than half of humanity is not a world built for peace. It is a world built for resentment. It is a world built for division. It is a world built for conflict. And we are seeing the consequences unfold. Democracy is eroding because people have lost faith in governments that serve billionaires instead of citizens. Extremism is rising because economic despair breeds anger, and that anger is being weaponized by those who are offering scapegoats instead of solutions. Violence is escalating because inequality creates desperation, and desperation leads to instability. This is not speculation, this is already happening. But what happens when it happens at an even greater scale? Because here is the reality: the climate crisis will accelerate all of these fractures. We are already seeing more frequent and extreme climate disasters, crop failures causing food prices to skyrocket, coastal cities facing flooding, leaving thousands without homes, entire communities forced to migrate not by choice, but by necessity. This is just the beginning. What happens when food scarcity is not a crisis in one country, but in dozens? What happens when mass displacement is not in the millions, but in the hundred of millions? What happens when entire regions become uninhabitable, not temporarily, but permanently? If we think division, conflict, and authoritarianism are problems now, imagine a world where these crises multiply tenfold. This is not a distant future. This is the path that we are already on. And without actions, the inequalities we see today will expand beyond anything we have known before. But we have a choice. We can allow the green transition to be shaped by the same economic forces that created the climate crisis, or we can ensure that it is built on a foundation of fairness, inclusion, and justice. Because right now, that is not what is happening. Take the case of critical minerals. A lot of people mentioned that in their speeches. The materials that power our so-called green economy right now. Right now, the demand for lithium, cobalt, and nickel is skyrocketing, driving a new rush to extract these resources. But who benefits from that extraction? Too often, the answer is not the workers in the mines, not the communities surrounding them, and not the nations where these resources are found. Instead, profits flow to multinational corporations while local communities bear the costs. This is not an accusation, it is a fact. And it is a fact we must confront if we are serious about building a green transition that is truly sustainable. A transition built on extraction without equity will fail, because it will deepen the same inequalities that have driven conflict, displacement, and exploitation for centuries. But it does not have to be this way. A just transition is possible, one where the benefits of a new economy are shared, where local communities are partners, not casualties, where fairness is not an afterthought, but the foundation of progress. And if we are truly committed to a better future, that is the only transition we should accept. And yet there is another challenge we must confront: the fact that immense power is held by corporations. We are witnessing the rise of techno-feudalism, a system where the world's wealthiest companies dictate policy, control economies, and shape the future with no democratic accountability. Who owns the infrastructure that powers the digital economy? Who controls the global supply chains that determine what is produced? Who is shaping the future of artificial intelligence and digital surveillance? Not democratic institutions, not the people, but a small handful of unelected billionaires. This is not capitalism as it was once promised. It is not democracy as it was once promised. It is a new kind of economic servitude, where decisions that affect billions are made behind closed doors by those whose only loyalty is to their shareholders. If we do not challenge this, the green transition will not lead to a more democratic world. It will lead to a world where corporate power is stronger than ever, at the cost of workers, communities, public interest, and the planet. So what do? We recognize that peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. That equality is not a utopian ideal, it is a necessity for survival. That a green transition without equality will not create stability, it will create more division. Because a world where prosperity is hoarded, where justice is selective, where economic power determines political outcomes, is a world that cannot sustain itself. The only green transition that will last is one that is built on cooperation, inclusion, and shared prosperity. One where communities are not just resource providers, but decision makers. One where sustainability is not just a corporate slogan, but a lived reality for all. One where the future is not dictated by profit margins, but by a commitment to fairness. The future is not written yet, and we are the ones who decide what happens next. Will we allow the same forces that led us into the crisis dictate our response? Or will we finally choose justice over greed, peace over profit, equality over exploitation? The world we want will not build itself, and it is time to build it together. I will leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou that I think I've talked about human crisis and the climate change and the wealth gap and also the techno-feudalism, but I think we have another crisis that us as human beings, and I think it's a crisis of courage. I feel that we are not courageous enough to take the decisions that we need to take to face the future. And I also think that our silence will not protect us. It won't protect us from what is happening and the development that we are seeing today. So this is what, I haven't said this because I'm not that clever, but courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So I urge you to find courage within yourselves, because I believe we all have it. Thank you very much.